it can be so detrimental to our health to think, okay, today I have this laundry list of things to get done and I need to knock everything out. And it's like, I also talk as a coach about the language that we use, like knock it out, attack my list, all these words that just create this feeling that you're not in alignment with the work that you're doing.
Welcome to Get Carried Away. And today I'm getting carried away with productivity specialist, just the maven. She is the founder of The Conscious Entrepreneur, which is also two words I struggle to spell, but the founder of the productivity space, Gail Baral. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you, Carrie. Thanks for inviting me. This is my second time on your podcast, so I feel very honored to be here today.
Yes, I had to bring you back because your knowledge and expertise, I love to gush about. And you are someone I like to consider a serial entrepreneur. You've had worked in multiple industries in entrepreneurship, multiple coaching programs. So to me, you have a wealth of knowledge that I know our audience will benefit from. Now, we're going to be talking about productivity and accountability, especially for entrepreneurs, groups, teams, communities, all of it. I did a little research because one of the things I've realized, and I'm sure you have in the last few years, the word productivity is such a buzzword. It's always like thrown around like organic. So I went to Instagram and I checked the hashtag. I put hashtag productivity, and it's been used 3.4 million times in posts. Wow. The other word, productive, that one had been used 1.3 million times. And I realize everybody is kind of talking about being productive, productivity, habits, all of the things, accountability. Why do you think the word productivity is such a buzzy word these days?
That is such a great question. I think it has been a buzzword for maybe 5 years or so, but it really picked up steam during the lockdown. Yeah. Because so many people's lives were changed and their environments were changed, their situations were changed, and yet they still had to get work done. And so they went through this massive reframing of how they work, where they work. And companies, obviously, if they work for a company, they're looking at how productive their employees are. And there are tons of statistics online that all contradict each other around whether people were more productive or less productive. But that just became one of the KPIs that some companies could look at. But for us entrepreneurs, it's been an issue for us forever. It's something that we have to individually look at. Am I being productive today? So it has always been a thing for us, but when it became more of a global thing, a lot of people jumped into this space to share tips and tools and ideas and things that were always existed, but it just wasn't the focus. And then suddenly it became the focus.
Absolutely. And I think also what happened for me, we work from home, but now I was working home with other people. Like now everybody's working from home. So my productivity slowed immensely as a result that I had to be managing other people's productivity. Exactly. So that influenced that. And I don't know if you saw, I think it's either Google or Tesla that now is making everyone back to the office. No one can work from home anymore because they spent so much money on these grand buildings and everything. But then other companies like Facebook and Seattle are like, no, you guys can stay home. Yeah. Like you're right about there's such different opinions and research shows different things. And it's so contradictory. It gets very overwhelming, I guess. Now, as speaking specifically to entrepreneurs, especially someone who's the entrepreneur that pivoted, because a lot of pivoting also happened during the pandemic. I've got to now figure out how to put my business online or I was in person, but now what do I do? Including myself and the Bra Network. What would you recommend, or what do you think, people struggle with when they're making that transition from like corporate to entrepreneurship, or I was a teacher and now I worked in a community and now I'm working at home. What are they, what kind of like, what do they need to help make themselves productive at home? Because a lot can distract you.
Absolutely. I think the number one thing that happens is you go from being in an environment where you are accountable to maybe one particular person, and then a whole team of people that you work on projects with and that you collaborate with. But there is one particular person or a small group of people that are your manager or your overseer, that, or if you're the CEO, that are your board. There's always somebody that you are ultimately accountable for. But when you become an entrepreneur, the only person you are totally 100% accountable to is yourself. And when we work in an organization, we learn to, manage our own time and to get things done. But we always have in the back of our mind, there are these people that have their eyes on me, that are expecting things from me. And my income, my bonus, my raise really depends on their perception of the work that I do. Where when you're an entrepreneur, nobody's watching you. So when you're at home and the kitchen beckons, it's like right there,
Right.
calling your name. No one is seeing you get up 20 times to go to the kitchen or to go outside or to play with the dog or whatever. And so that's
Right.
really the number one thing that changes, that we become more accountable to ourselves. And that is a big transition and process that for some people is really, really challenging. For others, not so much. And it depends on the situation they were in, but also their own natural, unique tendencies towards the way they work.
Absolutely. I know for myself, I work better in a group setting, and I don't necessarily need to be working with somebody. It's kind of like parallel, like just
Right.
being right next to each other. You work on what you're doing, and I remember doing that in high school. Studying next to each other, but not actually studying the same thing.
Yeah.
And I tried to do that as much as possible. But like you said, when the pandemic happened, we were all now forced to have this space now online. And you found a brilliant idea of like, well, let me show you how to do it online. So tell me why you think now, even though we're all coming back, people are wanting to stay home, and we need these kind of virtual spaces for co-working. Why do you think we still want that?
Well, I think we still want that because we need it. I think we need it, and we recognize that we need it, whether we work at home or whether we work in an office. And particularly some of us really need it because we are easily distractible. And we're living in a time, sometimes I call it the age of distraction, because there are so many possibilities of things that can distract you. And for one, the biggest shift in the way we work is this,
Yeah,
our
the
mobile
phone.
phone, that it's this smartphone that is right there with the world. We have access to the world right here in this little thing. And so it's so easy, particularly for somebody who is interested in things, curious, which is myself describing my reason why I am so addicted to my phone. I'm curious and I'll get an idea. I'll be working on something and I'll think, oh, I wonder about la la la. And I'll just start and I go down a rabbit hole of distraction. It's not wasteful. I'm not, online gambling. I'm not
Right.
feeding into a habit, but a destructive habit. But it turns, my curiosity turns into a destructive habit when it takes me off course.
Wow, that's an interesting way of saying curiosity, as what type of habit that is, and as opposed to a destructive habit. What would be an example of a destructive habit?
Okay, so when we are facing some project, let's say that is something that we really don't like to do, like maybe for me, it's the accounting. I'm really
Right.
not good at that. And so I struggle with wanting to put my energy and time into it. Or if it's something that it isn't a top priority for the people that I'm working with, but it's something that's important to me that I want to do, but it's not urgent.
Hmm.
So it's something I keep putting off and putting off and putting off, and I'm carrying it in the back of my mind. It's sitting at the bottom of my to-do list every day, sort of taunting me, reminding me, you need to get this done, you need to get this done. There's so many things like that cross our desks, as particularly as entrepreneurs who wear, 10 different hats. We could have 10 different lists of things to do, one for each hat.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that can just sort of take us off the path of focus. And the
So so easy too, because they're all important. That's the thing, is it's like, yeah, accounting's important and my marketing plan's important and product and sales are important. But I struggle also with prioritizing where I spend my most time, because obviously I want to do what's my favorite first,
right, right,
and the thing that I hate last. But sometimes I feel like the thing that, and I don't know if you've experienced this with the people you've worked with, the thing you hate the most is actually the thing that's going to make you go the furthest.
always. Because sometimes it's the thing that you don't actually hate it. You fear it.
Yes,
You
that's
know,
a better word. Yes, you
Yeah,
fear
you
it.
hear it. We think we hate it. Like I say, I don't like accounting. I don't like accounting. But the truth is, I ran a $20 million business a couple of many years ago,
Mhm.
and I had to review financials every day, and I was good at it. And I built that business. I made that business a profitable business. But here I am in my own business, and I say I hate accounting. I don't like accounting.
Right.
It's just a little bit of fear that it's important, and yet it's not my forte. It's not the thing that lights me up. So I give it a bad name and I put it to the side and I keep putting it off. And as I put it off longer and longer, it just grows bigger and bigger. And so then it's a big nut to
Yeah.
crack. So it's not even that I hate it so much. It's not even that I fear it. It's just a big project that
Mhm.
overwhelms me. It becomes that. It goes from what you think it is into actually just being so big that it's going to take a big chunk of time. You don't feel like you have the time, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, when you have these types of projects, the sort of the toxic things that we do to get away from them is, like I said, going to the kitchen or doing just the things that we love doing, because we want to avoid that big project that is giving us some sort of feeling or emotion that isn't great. So
Yeah.
we find ways to avoid it. And one of the biggest ones that I hear the most, and the one that I struggle with the most, is scrolling on my cell phone.
Hmm.
And it's a combination of avoidance and curiosity, because the
Yeah.
curiosity takes me there, but once I get there, it's really about avoiding the other thing that I really should be doing.
I
I think
and
that's common.
I've been there. I've been like in the middle of writing a blog and I'll write a word, and it'll make me go, oh, I wonder why I wrote the word wine tasting. I wonder if there's any wine tasting nearby. Now I'm
And
looking for
before you know
events.
it, yeah, you're booking your next trip to Sonoma.
Exactly. And I'm like, no, I'm supposed to be writing a blog about a winemaker who's founded by
Right.
a female entrepreneur. That's so, so true. I can say, and I'm sure you can speak to this as well, is when you do get that big project, when you do complete it, the feeling that you have, I wish there was a drug that could provide that it's
Yeah.
like a huge dopamine hit of like,
Huge.
wow.
Huge. Well, the neuroscience says that we actually get more dopamine in the process than we do at the very end. And I don't disagree with that, but I do know from having done the productivity space work sessions with so many people, there's a pretty big hit at the end too.
Yeah.
The way I describe it is giddy with joy, because that's
Yes.
sort of like when people at the end of the session, we ask, so how did that go for you? And for, 9.9% of the people, they're giddy, they're excited. I can't believe I finally finished that project. I can't believe I got more tasks done than I thought I would. Or this usually takes me 2 hours. I usually allocate 2 hours to do this, and I couldn't believe when I finished it in 30 minutes
Yeah.
because I wasn't allowing myself to be distracted.
Mhm.
I realized, like I had somebody recently, an attorney, who said, I realized that I was thinking that doing these briefs took me 2 hours. But I realized that it took me 2 hours because I was allowing myself to be curious and get distracted and go down this rabbit hole, the one that you were
Right.
describing. So yes, it does take me 2 hours when I do that. But she didn't do it during the session. She just wrote a little note on her brain dump sheet to remember to go back and, explore those ideas when she was done. And she finished it in 30 minutes, 25 minutes.
Wow. Yeah, and we're going to get into more about the productivity space for sure, and your advice and tips and how you work with teams, entrepreneurs, and communities. But one of the words you had written about and is on your website, the mindful productivity. What is that when you talk about being mindful productivity? Like, how would you define that?
Well, I just want to go back for a minute to when we were talking about why productivity is such a buzzword. So, what has happened
Sure.
in the last 2 years, it has become a buzzword, and a lot of people have varying degrees of love and disdain for the idea of being productive. And it's true that for some people, the idea of being productive can get really toxic.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I was noticing with some of the people in my community, that the idea that when they weren't being productive, it turned into a trigger and it turned into heavy anxiety, overwhelm. The distractions were just creating so like mental health issues that people were really having trouble dealing with. And so the idea of pushing to be productive, like this hustle, I'm not going to be successful unless I hustle, unless I grind and get this done, and I have to work all these hours to be successful. For some people, it can turn toxic. So I wanted to figure out a way to communicate to people that what productivity could be and how they could approach it in a way that is conscious,
Yeah.
and positive. And so that is why I use the term mindful productivity. And it aligns with how I coach my clients as well, which is really about self-awareness
Hmm.
and understanding and taking the time to be intentional about what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and setting the boundaries for yourself, because you are, a lot of our clients are entrepreneurs working alone or with a family in the background, but trying to get their own thing done. And so mindful productivity is really, we debate the idea that productivity has to be about being in the hustle and the grind, because we
Yeah.
don't believe that it's healthy mentally or physically, and that we can be mindfully productive, get things done, be successful, and still,
Live a healthy
live
life.
a healthy life. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I have seen kind of the pendulum swing the other side with the hustle culture of things. I'm a hustler. I'm hustling. I got to hustle. To me, hustle means like you got to go really, really fast. But it seems like you're trying to swindle me out of something. So when I first started hearing the word "I got to hustle," I was like, "What are you trying to get from me?"
Right,
And I
right,
realized it's used in the quickness.
right.
Um, so I think that's really, really important, because you're right. Boundaries, especially, and I feel like for myself, and when I've worked with you in the productivity space, that creating a boundary was actually creating a habit. So I had to create, like, okay, this is my structure, this is the boundary. And I actually had to visualize the boundary is you're not going to look at your phone, you're not going to worry about the laundry. That's the boundary. And then just that in and of itself, practicing that kind of created this habit, like, okay. And I also would look at the time. Do you
Right.
find that like a lot of people are focused on time when it comes to productivity?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think it can be so detrimental to our health to think, okay, today I have this laundry list of things to get done and I need to knock everything out. And it's like, I also talk as a coach about the language that we use, like knock it out, attack my list, all these words that just create this feeling that you're not in alignment with the work that you're doing.
Mhm.
It's just, it's so focused on the outcome and not the process and the planning. And
Ah,
so, I feel like it's so important for us to just stop, take a breather, and notice what habits we have when it comes to the way we work
mhm.
that are empowering us and supporting us, and what habits do we have that are disempowering us and creating this mental clutter that therefore manifests in us being all over the place and distracted and not moving forward, not making progress. So reining that in for some people is scary.
Yeah.
It's scary, and the word structure also can be, uncomfortable for some people who, like myself. I it's funny because I don't think that I have structure, but when I step back and look at my life, there's structure everywhere. And there
Yeah.
has been for such a long time. And yet I think of myself as a person who can go with the flow, but I realize that's really not how I live my life anymore because it
Mhm.
wasn't working for me.
Yeah.
It just wasn't working for me. And I needed structure, and I started creating structure in different areas of my life to sort of take the burden off of my mind so that my
Yeah.
mind could have a little space and a little inner peace.
I thrive in structure myself too.
Yeah.
And I think w- uh, having structure makes me better anticipate outcomes.
Yes.
So like, okay, I've done this before because this is a habit of structure I have in place. So I can kind of guess like how this is going to end up. It's when you get surprised, like, oh, wait a minute, there's a pandemic.
Exactly.
What's happening to all my structure?
Yeah. And then you have
um,
to start from scratch and create because your life situation changed. You have to create something new. And that takes time. It
for
took us
sure.
all some time, right? But the truth is that, especially if you are an entrepreneur and especially if you're leaving a work environment and now working on your own as a solopreneur, even with a small team. I have a small team of people that I work with, as I know you do as well. You still, to be successful, you need to embrace the idea of structure and systems because it saves you so much time
Yeah.
when you have something that you can turn to, that you have a way of doing it. It also saves you brain power, and brain power is so important when it comes to being productive.
Mhm.
Having the energy to get through your day and get your work done. And if you're always reinventing the wheel, if you don't have any structure around your deep work time versus your Zoom time versus your meeting one-on-one meeting time, it will take its toll. And we've both seen it in our friends, our peers, our coworkers. We've seen how it can really take its toll on
Absolutely.
us.
I think one thing I had learned from you when we were doing the productivity space was a phrase I hadn't heard before was decision fatigue.
Yeah,
And when you said that, I was like, oh. And you had talked about
absolutely.
how you know what you're going to wear, you know what you're going to eat for breakfast, you know where your water is, and you have your tea, and you were like, you had eliminated all these decisions before you even started your workday, and that to me was a huge light bulb moment. Do you see people struggle with that fatigue of having to make multiple
Absolutely.
decisions?
Absolutely. And we're just so unaware of it. And I discovered it by mistake. Again, literally being aware, self-aware of where I would get stuck. And so I discovered this. I started to work on this when I was just starting my career in my 20s. I lived in New York City. I was in the fashion industry. And I discovered that if I was late to work, it was because I was struggling to put together the outfit that looked good, represented who I was, but also could get me to work because I might have to take the bus or walk to work because the
Right.
bus didn't show up. So I needed the shoes to walk to work, but I wanted to look good, et cetera, et cetera. And if I was late, it was literally because I didn't have my morning act together.
Mm.
And so I started making changes to make it easier for me to put together outfits and to have the staples in my wardrobe, that like the walking shoes that would work with the outfits that I like
Yeah.
to wear. And just I narrowed down the types of things that I wore and the color. As you know, I've been wearing black ever since I was in my 20s because everything in my closet goes together. So, and of course I have a couple of white things and some, I like pink, but whatever. But that was where I started realizing that I had decision fatigue, and that by the time I would get myself to work and I was late, I was already tired. I already had tapped in so deep into the well of decisions that I would make bad decisions. Like I would make a bad decision about what I would end up eating for breakfast because I was running late. So I would stop and get a bagel with butter. And, every decision I made from that point on was not a good decision because I was already stressed and tired. So that's where it started for me. But now it extends into other areas of my life too, where I want to create habits so that my brain can be focusing on the things that I think are important for it to focus on. Like, how am I going to, support people today? How am I going to show up for the people that I'm meeting with, for my clients today? What are some of the things that they might be struggling with that I can support them with? If I'm thinking about what I'm going to have for breakfast and what I'm going to wear, I'm not thinking about those things that are really empowering me.
Wow. Yeah, it's so true. And I was one of the best things I learned from working with you is that try to eliminate as many decisions as possible because it takes up space for you to think about what you need to be doing.
Yeah.
So that was a huge eye opener for me. So let's talk about the productivity space. What kind of inspired, you're a great coach, you work with entrepreneurs, you work with teams, communities, groups, but what made you think, I got a great idea for another new business?
I know. Again, it turned into a business during the pandemic, but this is something I've been doing for quite some time with friends, and that is inviting them over because I'm a solo entrepreneur. I work alone, but like you said earlier, I'm the same way. I do thrive having somebody working with me. And I learned through just my research that there's a term called body doubling. And it's something that is recommended for people that are diagnosed with ADHD, but I think it's something that anybody that struggles with distraction can use. And that is the idea of having somebody right next to you doing the same thing. And so it's a thing that doctors often will recommend to people with ADHD. So set a time, figure out what you're going to do. Like say you have a project that you want to work on, or if you're a student, you have some studying you need to do. You find somebody else to sit by you and get the work done. And you were describing that that's something you've been doing for a really long time, but it's actually a thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a thing. So I feel the same way, that I don't necessarily need to work in a corporate environment, but I loved the idea that there was people sitting near me working and I could see them working. And it in some ways it helped me be accountable, internally accountable to myself. So I've been inviting some friends over to do that with me. So they'll come over to my house and we'll set some goals for the day. And then we do these work sprints. We work for a while, then we take a break, then we work again, then we take a break, then we go out for lunch, and then we come back and we work again. And everybody has loved it. All of my friends that came over to do that really loved it. So I only did it, every now and then when I was feeling like I had a project I needed to work on and I wasn't getting anywhere. I would create this environment to support myself, but also to help my friends. So during COVID, when the Zoom world was created, I realized, well, let me see if we could do this on Zoom and maybe more people can join us. And so I started doing some Zoom sessions. And as you know, I worked with you in the bra community, and we offered 6 sessions every other week. And we had, such great feedback from it that I realized that this is something that a lot of people could use. And the virtual world gives us the opportunity to reach people everywhere. So,
True. And we would have people on our Zoom calls. One would be in Austin, one would be in Boston, one would be in San Diego. And it kind of opened up the idea that, oh, wait, we could all work together and not in different time zones and everything. And it was, I think what was really beneficial, and we had called it Brahmadoro because We use the Pomodoro method, which I want you to explain as well. But it was kind of nice to know what you were going to ask us. What are we working on? And you had given us is this a project that's been on our to-do list for forever? Is this a passion project? Like we gave it a name, what we were working on. Okay, this is a passion project, or this is something that's going to push me forward. And I think that knowing that, we were like, oh, well, I'm doing something. This is me being productive because I'm doing something that's going to push me forward or get off my to-do list or something I'm passionate about. And you had structures of the group so well that after we had worked in our sprints, we had to then share. And as a former teacher, I love a think, pair, share. I love let's get together, let's think about it, and then let's share it. Like that's my favorite thing because I like to have, full circle. Like what are we learning and how, and let's, examine after we've learned it. How do we apply it? Now I know you don't only work with, the Baral network, you work with entrepreneurs, communities, teams, is the structure give me an example of the structure of a productivity sprint.
Okay. So yeah, I think what I came to realize, and I think what is, everybody has their secret sauce. I think mine is really being able to figure out a structure and I'm very good at figuring out process. Like what are the steps? Having been an interior designer, I think that really taught me how to figure out step by step by step and to look for what could happen from one step to the next. And so I took all this research and put it into a process. And so the way as you mentioned, we start with what are your goals? What are you going to be working on today? What type of project is it? Because we want to create awareness. And that reflects in my coaching, like I said, as well. It's really about becoming more self-aware. Instead of just getting up in the morning, coming to your desk and just jumping right in, giving yourself 5 to 10 minutes to just take a bird's eye view of what's going on. What's on my schedule today? What do I have coming up the next week? How much time do I have for deep work versus my meetings? It just creates this sense of calm that we don't get when we just jump right in and then we're jumping from thing to thing. So that's really the first thing, is really to help people be intentional. So by just signing up for the work sprint, you're putting on your calendar, I'm going to work on a project on Tuesday at, 6:30 in the evening. We have some in the evening for people that have busy, crazy days. At 6:30 in the evening, I'm going to be working on my passion project that I have not been able to work on for 2 years. And I'm going to be paying for it. So I'm going to show up. I'm going to make sure I show up. And since I'm paying for it, I'm going to take the time to use the worksheets that they provided for me to think about what I'm going to work on. And so the next step is, once you've identified, what that you're going to commit to this, creating this space around the work, then I ask people to think about, well, what are you going to get out of it? And sometimes it's really just relief that I don't have to look at it anymore on my to-do list. And sometimes it's excitement because I have not been able to work on my passion project for 2 years and I am started. And, a wheel in motion stays in motion. So sometimes it's really just about getting started. And there's, like I said, that giddy feeling of, I just took a step towards this dream. So I get people to stop and think about those things before they work on the project, because that's what really gives you the motivation and propels you to get it done. And then it's really important to think about, okay, if that's the project, what are the different steps that I need to take? So we walk people through how to write a to-do list, because some people their to-do list will be work on my passion project. Like maybe that's writing my memoir. So they might say work on the outline, and they'll think that's a good to do. My next step is to work on the outline, but it's so vague. What does that mean? What are some of the steps that you need to do before you can say, I finished the outline? And it might be, I'm not really sure what an outline looks like, so maybe I need to do some research. But if you don't put research, what a book outline should be, you're not going to feel like you were productive. You're going to feel like you got off track, because you
Yeah.
didn't actually write anything. But the truth is that was an important step and you were just overlooking it. And then you were beating yourself up for not getting anything done. So I try to help people
Yeah.
in the productivity space really be realistic about the steps and to write those steps down and then figure out what they can accomplish while they're co-working in the space.
Mhm.
And so pick two or three
Love.
things that you can work on during your time together and write it down. So you go from the biggest picture of what's going on in my world today to, okay, I'm going to focus in and I'm going to do some deep work today. What project am I working on? And then you go even deeper into what are the steps that this project needs. And then you go even further into what steps can I get done in two 25-minute sprints.
Right. Which brings me to the Pomodoro method. Tell
Right.
us a little bit about that because I had heard about it briefly when I first became an entrepreneur. And I failed at it because all I would do would be like, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it? But it wasn't until I was having someone else keep the time that I was
Yeah.
able to actually do it. So tell us about the Pomodoro method.
Yeah. It's interesting you should say that because a lot of people have said, I've tried it and I didn't do that well because I was so focused on the clock.
Yeah.
So I think having somebody else be the timekeeper is, again, it's like
It's
taking
huge.
less off your mind and knowing that someone is going to, let you know when that time is up. But anyway, the Pomodoro method I love this story because it was created by a guy who was in college who was really having trouble studying. And he couldn't get himself to study. And so he was doing some self-reflection as I recommend and said to himself, if I could just study for 10 minutes, that would be fine. If I could just get myself to do it for 10 minutes, that would be a start. I can do it for 10 minutes. Of course I could do it for 10 minutes. So he set an alarm. He found one in his kitchen. It happened to be a tomato alarm, one of those kitchen
Kitchen timers,
not
yeah.
alarm, timers. And he worked for 10 minutes. And once he got himself started, he found he could go longer. And so he started to use this technique and obviously he graduated from college, but what he discovered through the course of experimenting with this idea that you could start with 5 minutes. And once you get into the movement, the motion of it, you can keep going, was that 25 minutes was sort of the ideal amount of time. And there's been a lot of research done. And again, there's always conflicting research, but I tend to agree with the experience that I've had in doing 25-minute work sprints. And that is that when someone else is taking the time, when there's other people in the room that you can see are working, it allows you to let go of some of the anxiety of just getting into the flow. And people get into the flow pretty quickly. And so they're in the flow, you get deep into concentration, about 15, 20 minutes in, it starts to wane. And so you reached your peak of concentration, it starts to wane. You could keep going, you could push yourself. I do it all the time. I push myself to an hour, even an hour and a half. But where I'm at in the flow, in like that first 15 to 20 minutes, is amazing. So if you stop at 25 minutes, you just step away, give yourself a break, give your brain a break. When you come back, you get right back into the flow again, to that peak point. And we've had so many people come in and say, I was really resistant to stop because I was in the flow. It was feeling so good. Why would I want to stop? But I know that's what you do. So I did it. And I was amazed at when I came back, I got right back into it. That's never happened to me before. Mm-hmm. And it's because you were in the flow, you kept pushing and pushing, you did it for an hour, then you got up to go to the bathroom. When you came back, you weren't able to get back into it. You're fatigued. Your brain is fatigued. So that is the Pomodoro method is based on these 25-minute work sprints, a 25-minute work sprint, a 5-minute rest, and then another 25. And the technique goes to about an hour. So you go for about an hour, you do 4 sprints, and then you take a longer break.
Gotcha.
So it's the whole idea of getting quickly into the flow because you've eliminated a lot of the external distraction. You've set an intention to keep yourself in your structured space, in your productivity space, and you've decided what you're going to work on in advance before you just jump in. And so it's no wonder that when you're done a productivity space session, you feel giddy
You
because
do.
it feels good. Like
It does.
you
It
did the
really
right
does. And
thing.
I know for the women that attended our Brahmadoro sessions with you, they would they would, we would do the sprint and have the break, but they would look forward to the break ending. Like, oh, I can't wait to get back to that. I
Yes.
can't, or, like, oh, I finished that. What am I going to start again? So there is a element of excitement that comes with it, for sure, for sure. What if, and how do you apply that to when you're working with, a team? Maybe not just entrepreneurs, but other, worker bees out there.
Yeah. One of the things that's come up that's been really interesting working with teams that work in a company together is it's funny, but when most of the team, there's always going to be some people that can't show up, but when most of the team shows up, there is a sense of relief because they know that everybody on their team is doing their deep work at the same time. So they're not going to be interrupting each other, because that's
Right.
the biggest complaint that people have about working in a corporate or team environment, that it's so hard to get to their deep work because there's so many things coming at them that other people need, that by the end of the day, they feel like they didn't get their work done. They were answering questions and moving other people's projects forward, but not their own.
Yes.
So that there's this sense of, one of the major things is this sense of relief that in this, time block, I'm actually not going to get interrupted by all these other people because they're doing the same thing. So that was really an interesting side effect of bringing teams together. That sense of relief and the ability to deep focus was so appreciated because of that relief, that for this next hour and a half, I'm not going to get interrupted. So
Yeah, that's huge.
it's huge. It's huge. And so it really is a very positive thing to, now some of those people may actually work near each other physically. They may be physically near each other, but knowing that everybody has agreed that during this time, we're going to have deep focus. And that goes back actually to something that I did when I was the president of that record label years ago. Was we used to have quiet hour. And it was from 10 to 11 o'clock in the morning, where the receptionist, in those days, you had a receptionist who answered all the phones and then funneled the calls to
Right. Right.
and we barely had email. Email was just getting started, so it wasn't the distraction that it is now. And in that quiet hour, you weren't allowed to get up and go to the accounting department to ask them about an invoice, or you weren't allowed to go to the design department and ask them for a sample. It was deep focus work. And people were so resistant to it, but I had heard about it. I think it was at the time Bill Gates maybe talked about something like that, where he has this quiet time. And that's where I got the idea.
Oh,
And
got it.
really, yeah. So that's how many years I've been thinking about ways to be productive, because I myself struggle from not getting my own work done because of distraction. So finding ways within a community or a corporate environment that you can give your people a chance to get into that flow, that's when you're really going to get the best from people. And they're not going to burn out. That's the other
Right.
thing that we haven't talked about. Whether you're in a corporation or you work for yourself, it is so easy now to get burned out because your brain is just being bombarded with so much information, so much visual information, auditory information. It's just so easy for people to get burnt out, to push themselves to the point. And when you're not doing your best work,
Yeah, exactly.
when you're burnt out like that.
It's so true, and also that's what leads you to burnout even faster, is that hustle culture, right? Hustle, 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 hustle. And then you start eating like crap. You're not taking care of yourselves and you're not sleeping as well. And it's a whole domino effect.
Exactly.
Can you share some simple strategies for people listening that they could apply today? Like what's like your top 3?
Yeah.
Or 2?
Okay. So I would say one of the things about the productivity space is my goal for the productivity space is to not only help people in the moment be productive, but to help them form new habits so that they can take the habits that they repeat in the productivity space and then start doing it on their own. Like you were saying, you struggled because you were always watching the clock when you were doing it on your own. So
Yeah.
once you get into the routine of the productivity space, you can incorporate that into your own life. But that, for some people, is going to be further down the line. So where I would start, in order to have a productive day, I would always start with, as I was saying, the bird's eye view and bringing it down. And so setting aside the time every day, it could be 5 minutes literally, depending on the scope of the work that you do, to just take a big bird's eye view of what's on your agenda, how you feel, tap into how you're feeling, where your energy is, what needs to get done versus what you want to get done, and make sure that there's a little bit of both on your list. And then I recommend highlighting or identifying, actually is the actual word, identifying the top 3 things that you want to get done. And I start with this, what I call the magic question, which is, what is the one thing that I want to make progress on, that I could make progress on today, that would make me feel like I, was productive, and highlighting what is the one thing. And so if you could identify that and say to yourself, which is what I do, you cannot end the day until this is done. This is so that you were talking earlier about setting your priorities, taking this time to identify your 3 things. And then the one thing is automatically setting your priorities. It's saying, this is the one thing that when I finish the day, I will feel like I accomplished what I wanted to do. Whether it was something you need or you want, it doesn't matter. It still makes you feel like you got that one thing done.
Yeah.
It could be a big thing. It could be a small thing. It could be making a doctor's appointment, or it could be finishing a pitch to somebody. But that one thing, and then the other 2 things, the last of the 3, are other important things that you want to get done. But that's about, and again, there's research to support this, that depending on the size of those things, that's always flexible, but about 3 things is the most that you can expect to get done. But I always recommend it's like a 3-5. So 3 are your top priorities for the day, the 3 things that you want to end the day having crossed off your to-do list. And then 5 other things that you would like to do, but they aren't. Like maybe there's a follow-up with somebody that isn't your top priority, but maybe 2 days later, it does become your top priority because you haven't heard from them. It's on your list to get to if you have time, but it's only been 2 days. So maybe you don't have to, but it's there for safekeeping. So your top 1, the next 2, and then the 5. So like I said, it's like thinking bigger picture and then just,
Funneling it down.
funneling down. And then the third thing would be to then take those top 3 and just identify what is the one task for each one of those things that you could do today? What is, being intentional about your work instead of just jumping in is really going to make a huge difference in how productive you feel. And then the last thing I would say is to plan your breaks. This was really revolutionary for me because, again, like I was saying, I could get distracted pretty easily. And if the kitchen beckons and I don't have a planned break, I'm just getting up and down, or I'm going outside, or, I call it procrastinating. I'm a big procrastinator. If there's I just like, that is such a good way for me to, work off some steam or to be distracted, to avoid something that I don't want to do. But if you plan your breaks and you know what you want to do during your breaks, that really, again, it's before you sit down to do your work, you're taking some of the things that are going to be in the back of your mind and you're putting them aside so that your brain can really focus and get into the flow. So if you put aside the fact that in 25 minutes, I'm going to take a break, and during that break, I'm going to take a refresh break and I'm going to, get some water, use the restroom. And then for the last 3 minutes, I'm going to step outside.
Yeah.
And, just do some breathing, or maybe do a yoga stretch or something. Oh, my back just cracked just doing that.
Just feeling it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it takes it off your mind, and you know that it's there. You've got that planned so that you can really hone in on so 25 minutes is 25 minutes of deep focus work is real 25 minutes. It's not, you know, 10 minutes of focus work and 10 minutes, 15 minutes of your mind wandering. It allows your mind to really stay focused.
Stay focused. Wow, this is really, really great advice. I love all of this, Gail. Thank you so much. Before we get carried away, I want to know more about where can we learn more about being a part of the productivity space?
So check out our website, which is theproductivityspace.com. We're on Instagram at the.productivity.space. We have on our website, we have a schedule. We update the schedule every month. So you can see what's available for the month. And we sometimes do special sessions that are focused, like last month or 2 months ago, we did one on just decluttering your office. Because if your office is cluttered, your mind is cluttered. So we do some special things where we have one coming up in the fall for creativity. So it will be for projects that are creative projects specifically, and we'll talk about creativity, and you'll learn a little bit more about how to get those creative projects out of your head and out there into the world. So that's where you could get the most information about the productivity space.
That's great. That's great. And I think what's great is you can just look and just you can just purchase one. I want to do just this one, or I want to come to this one. And I think that's really, really clever. And I have, I'm kind of biased because I really enjoy it. And I remember buying my 3, and I knew I got my 3 productivity sprints. I knew it was right before my knee surgery, and I knew exactly what I wanted to get done. And it helped immensely.
That's amazing.
It also is kind of nice to have it on your calendar. You're right about that. Bill Gates, he might know something there about putting it on your calendar. 10 to 11 productivity time.
It is. There's a self accountability to it, that putting it on your calendar is one thing, but actually paying for it and knowing that other people are going to show up to be there working with you, that's the shift that I think makes the difference, that helps you really get done these projects that just are lingering on your to-do list and not getting done.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely something. I don't like to let other people down, so I'll sometimes show up for them before I show up for myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. Thank you so much, Gail. This has been a wealth of knowledge, and I really appreciate it. And I know everyone listening is going to be like, well, okay, I got it. But you break it down very, manageable, which I like, in bite-sized pieces, productivity in bite-sized pieces. So let's get carried away. Now, you're building a business during the pandemic. So that was one thing that kept you busy. What else were you getting that gets you carried away? What's something you absolutely love? A lot of people started baking. Some people were sewing, cooking. All of a sudden people got dogs. What was something you kept yourself busy and carried away with?
Well, I always have loved cooking. So that's not really something new, to be honest with you. So the thing that I would say really shifted for me was I discovered that I have this, it's quirky, but I have this weird love for mysteries. Like I love mystery books, and I love mystery TV shows and movies. And I always have, but I wasn't consciously aware that it's a thing for me. Because during COVID, I purchased a membership through Amazon. There's a channel called the Acorn channel. I don't know. Nobody I know has a membership except me. I'm the only person that has ever heard of this channel. But they have so many great mystery shows, and they're not too dark, too gory, which I like, because I immediately start dreaming about those things. And there are so many, and there's like one called the Broken Wood Mysteries, which is out of New Zealand, and there's one called the Madame Blanc Mysteries, which is taken filmed in the south of France, and there's another one called Agatha Raisin, which is filmed in the Cotswolds in India. It's like in England. It's the same formula with quirky, interesting characters in a different part of the world.
Right.
And we solve mysteries like death, murders, basically.
Right.
I just really enjoy them. I really enjoy them. So my Acorn subscription was my thing.
Was your thing. Well, it kind of makes sense because you watching a mystery, your brain is working to solve a problem.
Exactly.
And, and you do that in the productivity space. You're solving the
Exactly.
productivity problem.
My brain loves the game of within the first 10 to 15 minutes identifying who I think did it and then seeing how it evolves. And of course, throughout the course, you're like, maybe not, maybe it was, but I'm always right. Always.
Yeah, I was going to say, how right are you?
I would say 99% of the time.
Nice.
And when one, I don't get it, that's a really good show. When you don't get it.
I do love mysteries as well. I actually like the suspense of it. I don't like gory things either because it'll stick with me. I don't like that. But I like when something's clever.
Yes.
I'm like, and you feel the twist or you find out the twist, but there is something really satisfying about figuring out the twist before the audience does. You're like, I knew it. It's so great.
Yeah. It's really a great distraction for me. Like at the end of the day, you would think that I would need something that doesn't challenge my mind to fix things, but it's almost like training.
Yeah.
It's like
I love
training
that.
my mind. Yeah.
I love that. Okay. Now the opposite. What's something that people get very obsessed about or get very carried away about that you can't stand or can't wrap your head around?
Okay. Well, it's very easy because it's the opposite. It is Breaking Bad.
Oh,
I
didn't like Breaking Bad.
That's the other one. It's Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah.
Stranger Things. Like I like sci-fi, but I don't like anything that is gory or whatever. And people just are totally carried away by those shows. And
very much so.
I can't do it. Just can't.
Yeah, my kids got really into Stranger Things, and I watched one episode and I was like, this is like an escape room. Yeah. You realize why you like this. It's like, oh, they found a little piece of this puzzle. Oh, they found this. And it's like, they're in an escape room.
Yes.
What I don't like about it is there's a lot of jump scares. It's very gory, and it's like, ugh, I don't like that either. Yeah.
The strategic part of it might be interesting to me, but I can't get past the gore.
Yeah, so. I can't either. Wow. Yeah. I'm with you on that. I love that. We should go watch a new mystery, like Murder, She Wrote. I used to love that show when I was a kid.
Yeah,
I loved Murder, She Wrote.
Me too. If you want, I could send you a list of my favorite mystery murder,
send it my way. Yeah, so absolutely.
That subscription, I think it's $6.99 a month, just keeps me busy forever. So when there's other shows that I like, I divert to the other shows, but I always know if I can't find anything to watch, go to the Acorn show.
Go to the Acorn. I love it. I get it. Acorn, it's a little nugget.
Yeah.
Love that. Well, thank you so much, Gail, for being here and being my guest. I know we've gained a lot of knowledge about productivity, habits, accountability. And if anybody wants to reach out to you, they're going to head to the productivityspace.com, right?
Correct.
That's right. Thank you so much, Gail.
Thanks, Carrie.